This is Straylight by Native Instruments. Really interesting because we have two layers. We have grain, we have sample. You can load your own samples. I'll show you how to do that. We have some macros and effect. So let's dive in. I'll show you what is Straylight, and then at the end I'll do some demo for some of the presets. You can listen and you can skip over if you just want to have a listen, or stick around if you want to see how this works. So in Straylight we have a main menu on the top here. We have perform, grain, sample, effect, and master. And the perform is pretty simple. We have the grain, we have the sample layers. In the middle we have the XY pad, which you can also control with your keyboard, your MIDI controller, with your mod wheel. And you can see also the loaded samples for the grain and for the sample. And we have 4 macros at the bottom. Now you can always click the top here. This is the main browser for a preset, and it is very simple to use. I'm gonna skip that. Very easy. Just select whatever, for example, keys, and then you can further filter this and find whatever you like. But you can also load different samples to either the grain or the sample layers. So I can, for example, select something metallic here and this one. And something else for the sample here, for example, rain. Double click. Now, if you want to actually use these macros with your keyboard, you can map them, right click, learn MIDI, and so on. So pretty easy. But the idea will be to assign those by yourself. If you want to create, you want to design your own sound, and I'll show you how you can do that. The grain layer. So here we have a sample loaded, and that sample is going to be sliced and fragmented into small pieces, which we'll call grains. Those grains will be replayed as I play the keyboard. And so let's get to know this layer or this view. So first of all, everything that you see in yellowish color, that's our grain layer. On the bottom, we'll see different controls for send effects, macros, and modulations. So for now, let's concentrate on the grain. And you can see that we have a mute button, we have sample selector. You can select different samples. We have volume indicators. And we can randomize everything that you see here. So we'll touch this a little bit later. Next, here we have the actual controls for the granular sampler or synthesizer. We have grains, cursor, range to control how the whole idea of granular sampling is working. And then on the right side we have tuning up and envelope to control some more common things that are related to synthesizers, like the envelope, the tuning of that particular sample, and so on. So let's concentrate on the granular stuff. So first of all, we have the interval between those little fragments of sample. And then we have the size, and you can also turn this on here. The KT means that this is key tracking, so the size and the size of that little fragment of that grain will be related to where you play on the keyboard. And then we have fade in and fade out to move between those little grains. So that's the grains. And in addition, we also have a number of voices that can be played at one time. And this is also related to the idea of grains, because every voice will get its own grains controls. Well, it's really hard to see it in this view, but if I'll play one note, you see the cursor just moving between the grains, and then I'll play 2 notes and 3 notes. And so on. So each time I add a new note, then we'll have more slices that are related to that particular voice. So that's the idea here. And then we have our cursor. So as you see, when I'm playing something, we'll see the cursor just jumping around. And that's the position here. Now right now we are locked to our host. That's what you see here in the scan. So I'll remove that, and now I'm gonna just shift this to 50%. So every time I play something, our cursor starts in the middle, or close to the middle here, 50%. And so I can just move this around, and that will be the speed of scanning. And we also have jitter, which will be introducing some randomness. And I can again sync this to our host. So right now that's the division here. I can do something else. Next we have the range. So as you can see, I can set the range for my my sample, and that will take part of the sample, and that will be where we work. So I can move this around, and I can lock them together and then move everything like this. And we can also bounce edges, which means that every time the cursor hits any of the edges, it will bounce off it. So that's the idea here. Experiment with that. That's pretty cool. And the rest, the tuning, the amp, and envelope are straightforward. So we'll jump over that. So that's the grain. Let's move on to sample. And here, again, we have a sample loaded. That's the sample we have, Tiny Music Box. I can change that to, I don't know, something else. And again, something else. And let's mute the grain. And again, I can transpose this in semitones. And I can tune differently. That's, I mean, very basic stuff. We can offset and start from any point in the sample. And we also can use a filter. Right now, this is a low pass, but if you'll click this, you'll see different types of filters. And then we also have filter modulation, which means that we have an envelope, ADSR envelope. And if you want to learn more about filters and envelopes and all that ideas, I mean, synthesizers, check my channel because I have a lot of material on that. I have some basic synthesis course, and throughout my tutorials, I always explain a little bit about synthesizers. So this is a very fundamental, very basic idea in synthesis, so check it out in my channel. And again, we have an amp envelope here and volume. So that's the sample, and then we have the effects here. So the effects will be divided to left and right. So on the left we have the grain, on the right we have sample, and you'll see that we have 4 different slots here, and that's the chain. So these are kind of inserts. So we have EQ that goes into modulations here, delay, and nothing there. And then on the right side here for sample, again, same idea. And we have a choice of all these different effects. We have filters, EQ, dynamics, gator, and so on. And I can just go and click any of these slots. I'll see the controls for that particular effect, and I can click this little icon here on the top and select something else, for example, a filter. So right now the second slot will be a filter, and I can see the controls, and I can also have a drop down here to select different type of a filter. So that's the idea here, and the same goes for the sample. In the middle here we have the XY pad, and we can assign different parameters for the X and Y. So right now that's detuning here, so I can click this and select something else. For example, I can select jitter. And on the bottom, the same idea, I can select something else, for example, noise. And that's pretty much it. So that's the effect. And let's move on to the master. And here we have some MIDI learning, or we can set the X axis and Y axis for the XY pad. And we have some other ideas here, like utilities here. We have width and panning and so on. So that's the master effects here. I can just select the slot. And again, these are combined to both the sample and the grain layers. So both of them here. So we have 4 slots, and we can just drag and drop this, just move them around and have a different change. So these are, again, inserts for the master effect. And now on the bottom, we have 3 different views. We have sound effects, we have macros, and we have modulations. Let's have a quick look at those. The sound effects are fairly simple. We have the sound effects for the grains and for the sample. And you can see that we have 2 sound effects. We have delay and we have reverb. So we can set the levels for both of them. And then we have the actual effects themselves. So we have a delay, and we can select different types of delays. And reverbs. Again, select different types of reverbs. And again, we have the XY. So the XY pad appears in different places. And we can see exactly what is set right now. So that's the sound effect. Let's move on to macros. Now we have 4 macros and the XY view here, the XY pad. And if you want to set any parameters to be controlled by any of these 4, then it's pretty simple. So let me show you how that's done. So let's go to the grain, and you'll see that on the top of all these parameters we have little indicators, letters, and you'll see that also in the effects, for example. So these are the assignments, either for the macros or for the modulations. And so let's go back to grain and, for example, get this gator to affect the interval. So how I do that, I'm going to click this and I'm going to select A. So the first one is A, the second one is B, C, and D. And now when I move this, you'll see that little dot here moving. So in order for us to control the range of the effect, we can use this little slider here. So let's move this all the way up, and now you'll see the dot moving the entire range. Now each of these macros, each of the 4 can affect multiple parameters. So you can assign this A macro to different controls. So that's the idea here. And now in addition to that, we can also go and select different names for these macros. So they are pre-configured, so you can just select from the list, just click this and you'll get something else. So if we'll create our own kind of user snapshot, our own preset, then you can just start from scratch and set whatever you like. Let's move on to modulation. So on the bottom again, you'll see the modulations, and we have 2 LFOs which we can assign, and we have a matrix that we can use to combine the 2 ideas here. We have these kind of buses where we can chain effects. We have the XY again, and we can use that to just move around. And then we have a shaper that can be assigned to different parameters, or it will use an input and it can affect different parameters. So you can actually take this and say, okay, you'll be LFO1, and I can draw this like this. And for example, I can go again, for example, for the position here, and click this and select, for example, we'll select the this shaper. Let's find the shaper, S1. We have two shapers, shaper 1, shaper 2. And we'll just have this moving. And so I have, in the input, I have the LFO1, that is affecting this shaper, and it moving it around here. And I can do something like this. And it will affect my cursor position. And so that's the idea in a nutshell. Of course, if you want to see more about the modulations and macros, let me know in the comments. I don't want to have this video too long, so try and explore this, and if you need more information, let me know. I'll try and help you. So finally, let's see how I can actually get my own samples in here. So let's do this. I'm going to jump over to my Cubase and I'll show you how we can load our own. This is the init preset. It has some samples loaded, but I'm going to replace the sample here. So let's see how to do that. I'm gonna just open up my media bay here. I'm going to find a nice sample, for example, my crystal ball. I'm gonna just drop it here. And that's the basic idea. And again, I can use the filter here, add some drive, cutoff, some sound effects. And we'll have this as well. And that's it. So to finish this video, I'm going to play some of the presets so you can appreciate, you can listen to what Straylight can offer. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next videos.